How can you make science and technology more relevant in Africa? What are the challenges for women in tech? How does one create a podcast with an authentic voice? Stay tuned as we dive into these topics and more through the story of our next tech champion. This is Molo Molo African Tech Stories. And welcome to Molo Molo African Tech Stories. This has been such an amazing surprise for you to decide to join us on this podcast.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for this conversation. I'm also quite intimidated in a way because you've been in the podcast game for so many years, and here I am, up and coming lighty, trying to pickle the brain of the mastermind here. But I think in general, that's really exciting to have you here. More importantly, it's actually quite telling that we've been able to now have you on the other side of the podcast where you are essentially sharing today
Yeah.
on the various aspects. So, but thanks for really just accepting the invitation.
No, man. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be on the guest. And yeah, man, I get it. Being in the beginning and, having people on who you might admire. And there's that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, so I get that part. And I'm grateful that I could be that person for you because I know what it's like. And also what a beautiful full circle moment that we're able to have this, given that you were on my show years ago. And then here I am now. So yeah, I don't necessarily, like I told you already, this side, I'm not necessarily comfortable in it. I enjoy asking the questions. I enjoy listening. But I mean, there are moments where I think people would love to know who this Anne is. So here I am.
Nice. No, and it's funny that you say that because you're right? It's really full circle, where I think almost 4 years, if not just under 4 years ago, we had this encounter where I was very surprised, I must be honest, to hear from this lady that wants to know more about me, and I'm thinking, where is this going? Where is this going? And of course, having a South African mindset, you're thinking, you see now, where this will be broadcasted in ETV or somewhere, and you're thinking, okay, maybe I must decline. But I was very happy that I could be able to share that experience with you in terms of my background. So I'm really glad that we are now able to reverse, in a way, and have you on the other side. But I guess before we start, and most people know certain sides of Anne, of course, and how do you're saying name? You say Chisa, right? Is that how you say? Yeah,
Chisa.
And Chisa. So, how would you introduce who Anne Chisa is?
That's a greed question because I introduce her differently depending on the audience. So, I'd like to think I'm very multifaceted. Oh gosh, it's English, that word.
Yes.
Where I have various different versions of me, intentionally, right? Because we experience people differently as well. And then there's a professional setting, there are people who I'm more comfortable with. So, depending on where I am, I introduce myself a bit differently, but I mean, it's still consistent. So if I had to introduce myself, I'd say I'm Anne Chisa. I'm from Malawi. That's consistent. I'm a scientist by profession. And also, I enjoy conversations with people. People are my favorite thing. I love interacting with people. I love the back and forth with it. So if it was in a professional setting, I'd say I'm a scientist and science communicator. Then there's also the part where I would say I'm also a child of God. I love God. I understand who I am in God. I'd also say I'm a sister. I'm a daughter. I'm loved by people in various capacities as well. So yeah, I'm very multifaceted. I'm also potentially somebody's mentor, somebody's boss, invertedly. I don't know how I feel about that title yet, but there's that title as well, so yeah. But at the core, I'm Aunt Chisa, who loves people, who loves interacting with people, and who's very big on community. I was actually having this conversation with a friend that I love community, and that's why there's various versions of me, because they fit in various different types of communities that feed into me in various different ways. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it's really beautiful what in terms of what you're saying, that the love of community, because then that will translate to my next question, which is you've now started, and of course most people who are watching this, and hopefully they'll watch in different platforms and listen in different platforms. You are the founder, if I'm not mistaken, and then we can go to the history just now, but of course you're the host of Roots of Science, right? And that's an amazing podcast where science and communication, but also the love for community and community building is really at the root, right?
Yeah,
see what
I
I
see what
did
you
there,
did
right?
there.
Yeah. You saw what I did there, yeah.
I see it.
You see it, So I'm giving spice to your podcast, and of course, the question that comes with it is why podcasting? And of course, STEM can easily be explained, but why within the framework of a podcast and not a blog? Or I mean, I know you're doing blogs now, right? So I know you've transitioned in the last few months to that, which is amazing. But originally that was purely audio podcasting. Why is that?
Okay, so the backstory of, maybe let me take a step back. So,
Yeah.
I was doing my master's 2018 to 2020. Well, I finished in 2020, and I was working with. I'm a crop scientist. So I work with a lot of farmers, and when I was completing my master's, my supervisor at the time, as all supervisors are like, so Anne, what are you going to publish? What impact factor? Which journal? And at that point, I was like, I was tired. I mean, my master's literally took my soul. Little did I know that my PhD I didn't even know what my PhD is taking, but it's taking something else. But yeah, so at that point, I wasn't even in that capacity. I just wanted to submit, be done with it, and just, But even with those conversations, I was left with so what? Like after I write these journals, after I publish, I mean, it's so good for the supervisor and the university in terms of getting credit for the publications, and even for me in terms of my academic record. Let me not make it about other people, but it was still like the so what. I was like, the farmers who I've been working with for these past 2 years, will they actually read these journals? And then I realized, like, hold on, this is a problem not only for me, but for all my other colleagues who work in various disciplines, right? So I was like, there needs to be more way, because the way that we communicate science as scientists is we talk to each other, we communicate science to other scientists. So I thought there needed to be another way to get back that knowledge in a manner that it could be easily understood. So that was like the main thing. So now at that point, I mean, podcasting wasn't really a thing 2019, early 2020. This is pre-pandemic. So, and I can still remember, that's why. But then I was like, there needs to be another thing. So I thought, blogging. I thought of blogging. Everybody was blogging at that point. But I was like, oh goodness, ain't no way. I'm not going to write again. I just wrote a whole thesis. No, thank you. I'm not about to start writing. I was like up to my neck. Then I thought, I love to talk to people. Maybe I could do like YouTube. Then I was like, yo, that's like a lot of work, like editing, what.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, interviews. I can just talk to people. I'm very good with talking to people. So I got she's like my big sister. One of the first episodes is with Sharon McGarry. She's now Dr. Sharon McGarry. We sat in an office and I just pressed record because I thought, surely this is easy. I'm just going to hit record, upload.
Yeah.
Little did I know. Actually, that there's
Dot
a lot
dot
of
dot.
back end. Yeah, there's a lot of back end. There's a lot of back end with the podcasting as well. But I mean, that is exactly it. That was the reason I wanted to take this information that we as scientists are doing and communicate it to people who would not only who would not find this information. Because if we're being honest, I'm a crop scientist, let's say somebody who's an engineer, we're not going to read the same type of journals. Even as
Yeah.
an agriculturist as well, there's plant breeding, there's plant pathology, and we all zone into our own little niche. We never really
Yeah.
read each other's work. So I just thought there should be a really cool way of doing it. So when I first started with that episode, so at that point, Sharon was working on the use of what do you call it, waste as fertilizers, so such as your human excreta, so your urine specifically as fertilizers. So I was like, this is so cool, people need to know, like, this is happening. Then I put it on and it was on Facebook, and a friend of mine, I always tell the story, he's a dancer, and he heard it was a short episode, and he was like to me, oh my gosh, and this is so cool, like, you mean our pee can be fertilizers? And I was like, in that moment I was like, yes, this is why I'm doing it. So somebody who is so far removed away from the science can actually learn about the exciting science that's literally happening in our backyard, in our province, so that was why and then I think that was why STEM podcast, and then why podcasting was really because I thought I was trying to run away from writing and video editing, but
Yes.
here I am. And there's so much work in this just podcasting as well. I mean, you know
know.
this. So yeah,
I
it's not as
know.
simple as just record and release. There's
I
so much
know.
stuff. Yeah.
Wow, that's a beautiful story. I mean, I think it's just amazing how kind of in as we meander through life, you have these aha moments, right? Where you kind of realize, oh my word, like this is it. The itch that I've been having and the frustration that I've been having, I can start chipping away through this medium and through this
Yeah.
approach. And it's really amazing to see not only your consistency, right? I mean, that was kind of one out of many episodes from there onwards,
Yeah.
right? And I think it's just a testament. This is again just kind of a kudos. It's a testament of just how much of an itch you've been having regarding just letting people know what's going on. And that kind of leads me to my next question, because that's quite important in terms of if you were to think of the achievements up to this point and of what you've able to accomplish, what would you say is your proudest achievement?
Oh, that one is a little bit difficult because there's so many wonderful moments, I think one of it is the fact that I was able to do this. Because, like, I'll be honest with you, in the beginning, nobody understood what I was doing. Like, nobody understood what I was doing. Hell, I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just literally doing this afraid. And just I didn't even know that I'd be here. I didn't have a plan, like a long-term plan, but the fact that it just kept on being revealed to me, and the fact that I'm still here, because there was a moment where I didn't want to be, but grateful, that I didn't quit. So I think if that case is just sure, the fact that I'm still here, I'm really proud of myself that I did it. I did this thing. There were people who literally told me it's a waste of time, like it's a distraction, and then now the same people are like, oh my gosh, Anne, well done. The same
It's
people who
amazing,
I was
right?
trying, yeah. I mean, the people who I was trying to get onto the show years ago, and they didn't want anything to do with it. Now they're the ones who are like, oh, hey, Anne, by the way, and I'm like, oh, but I don't keep grudges. So let's just be clear. I'm like, okay, sure, you want to come to the show? Come on. I mean,
Yeah.
I won't keep grudges, but it's just that moment of affirmation of really just taking the road very less traveled. And I mean, there's so many other moments in terms of just not only for me, but I think the beauty of it is that, like I said, that it's a community. So I've been able to see how maybe my show has somebody being a guest on my show has helped them open a door for something else, or how there's beautiful collaborations because I know this person who's doing that thing, and then I'm like, yeah, recommend this. So I think those
Yeah.
are really like proud moments where it's so much bigger than me. It's not
Mm.
only about me. And I think, oh, I don't know, man, that just gives me goosebumps, and that just makes it like, yeah, like this is it. This is what I'm meant to do, because it's not only about, Anne being amazing and doing great things, but it's the impact. And, just even recently with even my team who's part of the show, just watching the growth of the various different individuals and just seeing how using this platform has also helped them to hone their own skills as well. And that's just freaking amazing. And yeah, that's number two. And I think I made the third thing was last year, where I got to travel because of this podcast. Like, come on,
Nice.
who would have thought being on this podcast will take me to New York? Like, who would have thought? Like,
Wow.
the work that I do, like all expenses paid type of travel. Like, I was like, girl, is this me?
You
Like, my life.
made it. You made it.
I felt like, okay, listen, clearly
This is
this is it. I
serious.
think that was, yeah. And I think now, like, and I think another beautiful moment is just watching how proud my parents are, and my sister, I have a young sister. And
Nice.
it's cool to see how they brag about me. Like, they don't necessarily say to me always, but I mean, like, when they say, I think when I was traveling at that point, like, my mom would be like, oh, my dad would literally tell anyone who could listen that my daughter's going to New York. She's the first person who's ever gone that side in our family. So it's just that pride that really is so special. And the people who love me, that they also are like, she's doing something special, and it's a reflection of them as well. I think that's also
Yeah.
been, yeah, like some of the many things that I'm really proud of. That again, I think the consensus that I initially thought, okay, I don't want to say I thought it was only about me, but I think it's just the lasting impacts that this has in various aspects. So it's pretty exciting, and it's, oh man, what a privilege to be living this. I don't want to say dream, because I didn't know I'd be here, but now that it's
Yeah.
becoming a dream and it's becoming a realization, it's such a privilege.
No, that's such an amazing summary, just to kind of, where introspect, right? Where you've come from, and how you've arrived where you at, and of course the dreams and aspirations going forward. So let's try and take a step back and kind of connect those aspirations. I think you've already done that a little bit. So you say you from Malawi, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
And so did you were you born in Malawi, or where did you grow up predominantly, and how was your childhood like?
Okay, so I was born in Malawi, in Kota
Mm-hmm.
Kota, which is Lakeshore.
Mm-hmm.
Then we came to South Africa when I was like 6 or 7. So to be honest, I don't really remember that aspect of my childhood in like vivid memory, although they are parts. So the majority of my growth has been in South Africa, but I mean, we go back and forth to Malawi. But
Okay.
I still regard myself as a Malawian, because sometimes people are like, "But you've been here in South Africa so long, you might as well." Yeah, but I mean, there's just, home is still home. And like, although my immediate family in terms of my parents are in South Africa, I have extended family there, and it's always so good to go back. In terms of how my childhood was like, I was an only child for like 16 years.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah. I grew up as an only child. My parents are amazing. They literally went above and beyond for me to get the opportunities that I got in terms of schooling and things. And that is a testament, as well as it's one of the things that got me to where I am. And I think, I don't know, I'm trying to think about it. Like, I grew up, yeah, I grew up in a very happy childhood. I'm grateful to say that it was not never really lacked, or if I did, I didn't know that I lacked. My parents were really good in terms of providing what I needed. If I lacked anything, it was really materialistic things, as
Yeah.
children. But in terms of the core aspects of it, and in terms of like growing up, my mom is an avid gardener. She loves to be in the garden. Hated it with my soul, with my passion. She always laughs at me like, I cannot believe you are cannot believe you are here. I cannot believe I even have my own garden. And she's like, how? You would never step foot into my garden.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be. I thought I'd be like a lawyer or something. That's what I thought I'd be. I didn't want to be in science. Hell no. But as an African child, we forced to take science subjects, and here I am. But I mean, I love it now. But I mean, I didn't really see people who looked like me, so I didn't really have a desire for it. I know some people, they had their origin story, but mine was never to be a scientist. I think maybe that's why I really enjoy interacting with young people, especially who are still in primary school, etc., to kind of show them like these really cool people who are doing science and how science can open many amazing doors. So that's why there's that's also a very special place in my heart, like science engagement activities with primary school kids and high school learners as well.
Nice. I think that's quite. Yeah, I think it's quite important, I guess, to always remember that, irrespective of where you live, if you have a certain type of parents that are very much school driven, it doesn't matter what the child thinks, man. It's you are going to take maths. There's no thing of dropping maths or science. It's like, I mean, I remember very clearly when I was thinking about doing, I don't know, I had the choice of taking some other subjects, and my mom was like, "What are you gonna do with those?" Like, well, it's science, it's maths, you've got these are the careers. It's a doctor, da da da. Don't tell me about dancing. What are you dancing for?
No, yeah. I mean, yes,
No, but I
I
hear
just
you.
remember even for me, I had to take physics because obviously, and we had this part where our physics teacher, she was so horrible to us because we were not the smart kids, because it was divided into the smart kids and then
Yes,
us
yes,
average Joes. And I remember the first term, most of us failed. I think there's only like 5 of them who actually passed. And by passing, it was just like scraping. And she
yes.
basically told the whole class, like 80% of you should just drop the subject. You're wasting my time, whatever. And I went home and I was like to my parents, oh my gosh, I want to quit. She said we should quit. I want to do history, because I
Yeah,
was like, if I do history, I'm going to go into law. My parents were like, oh no, you're not going to quit. You are not.
yeah.
Like other kids quit. And I was so mad. And I was like, so and so has quit, like this one has quit, like so and so. And then we were stuck there, most of us, like the majority of the black kids, where our parents were like, oh hell no, you're not gonna quit. And in our 10-year reunion, and I can't remember, was it a couple of years back, I went back to school to that teacher, and she clearly doesn't remember it, but I went back and she's like, Anne, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm a scientist. I'm like, in your face. But I'm so grateful that my parents didn't make me quit, because if I wanted to quit so badly. But yeah, I think that's also a testament to my parents. My parents are amazing. They really push me to be a better version of myself, and I think in many cases that's why I am the person who I am, because even there are many moments where I wanted to quit a lot of things, but my parents were like, nope, go ahead, you're not quitting. And I think that's why they're so proud that they knew what they were doing. Clearly,
Yeah.
I just wanted the
You just
to
didn't
cut
see
it
it at the
out.
time.
Yeah, I didn't see it, but they knew what they were doing. So kudos to my mom and dad. Yeah.
Nice. Well done, mom and dad, whenever you are watching this.
Yeah, no, I'll
Now,
make them watch.
I mean, I want to stay on that because I think it's so important, and I do believe it shapes kind of our character. in terms of your parents and their ability or their constant willingness to show you where you're from in a way to try and keep certain values, how much, what are some of the things they would say, or what are some of the things that you remember were kind of sticking with you, or even the trip back home, right, back to Malawi? What are some of the images that you kind of recognize that really forged a certain way of you looking at the world in general?
I think initially when I was younger, like I said, I didn't get it. But the older I get, the more I understand. Particularly with my dad. My dad is an academic, so he's also doctor. He's Dr. Chisa already, but not in
Wow.
science, in
No pressure, no?
humanities. So, I mean, I saw that. I grew up seeing him going to university. I grew up his friends and colleagues who were academics. So for me, I saw that. I mean, and I think even when I was growing up, a lot of people were like, oh, so Anne, of course, you're going to be a doctor as well. So it was one of those things that was sort of expected. And I think initially there were moments, like I said, that I wanted to quit in various areas, but my dad was like, no, because he always told me that, you have to do the hard. Like, that's what my dad really emphasizes, that like sometimes you just have to do the hard. Like, and it was a lesson that I didn't get, and I thought my dad was just strict. But I realized that's what separates a lot of people from being good, great, and greater, because not a lot of people have the bandwidth or the resilience to do the hard. And this can be in everything. Even in podcasting, there's a lot of hard, and you have to do it. And if it wasn't for the hard, I wouldn't be here. Same thing with academics, and I'm sure in every aspect. So that's like the one thing that my dad taught me. And growing up, I mean, I was like, this man, he's so horrible. Well, no, not horrible. My dad was not horrible, but I was just like, he's so strict. Like, I don't want to do this. But like now I realize. And then also I think trips going back home, the older I get, I realize that like my peers at my age, many of them back home, they didn't finish school, or if they did, that's it. There was no tertiary education, because that was never, they never saw somebody go there. So why think that, somebody might have like 3 or 4 kids and they're still in the village? And that could have been my reality. It's like, and that's one thing that also I think my parents also told me, that, I don't want to say I'm not any different. It could have easily been me. That could have easily been my reality. And just really be grateful for the opportunities of where I am. And also as a woman, as a Black woman, being here is, come on, it's not easy. There's a lot of hurdles in our way. And I think being a young Black woman at my age doing what I'm doing it's a privilege. And I understand. At first I didn't get it, because I suppose I grew up in this reality. But when you start going out of the academic space, and then you realize, wait, in the real world, this is not, and that's why a lot of people go like, oh my goodness, wow, you're doing a PhD, that's amazing. And even in moments with a PhD, I feel like I'm failing, but to other people it's like, wow, or you doing this, and like I think that's what I've also come to realize, like the older I get, that it's all by God's grace, really. It could have been easily been me where I would have been where I am. So my parents really have helped me shape that do the hard, and there's all your reality can easily change. And I'm just grateful that they were able to come to South Africa, seek a better life, and therefore we have the opportunities that I have. And that's just something that I really keep to mind. And it really also humbles me, because I mean, it's all well and good, but I mean, it could have easily been me. That's what I always think, like it could easily have been me. So that's also something to really keep me grounded. And I appreciate those lessons from my parents in that aspect.
Yeah, well, that's really awesome to think about, just now that you're older and wiser, right? And it's the same with me in so many aspects. So when you're speaking, I'm like, yeah, that's me, yeah, that's me, yeah, that's me. Because funny enough, I think when you reflect on what how your parents used to deal with certain things that you did, or how they used to ensure that you stay on a specific track, you realize that is the discipline that you needed to, without knowing that if you didn't have them, you could easily have become like your cousin or your neighbor back home, or
Mm,
the girl or the boy that looks just like you,
mm.
that fundamentally there's no difference except support and
Yeah,
circumstance, right?
yeah, yeah.
um and that kind of I want to translate to kind of what that meant as a journey for you as a young girl who now is deciding to go for science. Is that something that you originally went to university to do? Is that I mean, of course you went, I guess. I'm not so sure, what degree did you do first? What degree did you actually decide to do?
So I did a Bachelor of Science in agriculture, specifically
Okay.
plant sciences. So yeah.
So from the beginning, you already kind of, already had the mindset. And how did that mindset work, that you knew kind of, okay, I'm going to agriculture? What pushed you? Hopefully it's not your mom.
Listen, well, not really, but I mean, maybe subconsciously. So I'm at that point where I'm like, what am I gonna do? I know some people did agriculture subjects in university, but in my high school, I mean, not in high school rather, or secondary school, they had those subjects. In my high school, we didn't have agriculture. I was like, what? Because when you think of agriculture, you think you're gonna play in the mud. So, the main reason was that I was, like I said, my dad was in academia. Okay.
Mm.
So he had various different friends in various different disciplines. So when I was thinking about it, because now, of course, I have my sciences, so it has to obviously be something in science. So initially I thought audiology, because, okay, so most of my mom's side, they all like medicine, right? Doctors, nurses, whatever. Think
Hmm.
of any medicine career, it's there. But I didn't want to be a doctor. I was like, oh, hell no. No, I don't want to be a doctor. And to be fair, my marks were not for me to be a doctor anyway, but I didn't want to.
Yeah.
But I had an interest in audiology. It was like, oh, this is cool. It's something different. I haven't heard a lot of people do it. And then, similarly, at the same time, so I'm talking to a lot of my dad's colleagues, people in environmental sciences. And I was like, okay, well, I love geography. I love bio. Sure, maybe that's it. Then there was an instance of my dad's friend. He's an agriculture engineer. And he's like, oh, why don't you do agriculture? And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, no, agriculture. It's something that is it's a degree that there's always going to be people who need to be fed. So you shouldn't have issues in terms of job placement. You can go anywhere. You don't have to be like where you'd have to get like a certain accreditation. And then like if you go to a different country, you then have to like, like how with doctors or lawyers and all of
Yeah.
that stuff. So I was like, huh, okay, cool. Then he's like, yeah, there's money in agriculture. You know how everybody's like, yeah, there's money in agriculture. So I was like, okay, cool. So I applied, and it was one of the first things that they accepted me for, and I was like, oh, okay, fine, let's do it. It's probably like a beautiful blend of geography. I love geography. I love biology. So I thought, okay, maybe this is it, and that's sort of how I got into it. By literal accident, and just like I said, talking and advising by my dad's friends at the time, and then boom, that's how I got into agriculture. And then the first year, it's just core, like, because I know like all science students do the same modules or whatever in the first year, and it was
Yeah.
just maths, physics, chemistry, bio. I was like, what? No, this is not what I'm here for. But in second year, then it started to make sense where we were actually doing the agriculture part. So that's when I was like, okay, cool. This is kind of cool. And then I think I'm grateful that along the way I met really awesome teachers who really got me excited and passionate about it. Like my now supervisor, I've been with him since honors. Professor Odindo, he is absolutely amazing. So I really got into it, and I was like, okay, cool. This is something that I really I could get into it. And then I started tutoring it as well. And then like being on the teaching side of it. And I was like, oh, this is fun. So yeah, so that's sort of like how I was like, okay. But it wasn't something that was like, I'm going to do agriculture. Like if you had asked me in grade 10 or 11 or even 12, I don't think I would have known that I'd be here.
Wow. Now that's really cool. I mean, it's just amazing if you reflect back, you realize how many people had to open certain doors, right? And not so much,
Yeah.
maybe not physical, but maybe just psychological, right? For you to kind of see, yes, it ticks this box and it ticks that box, and oh, okay, okay. And in a way, it was the same with me, whereby aeronautical engineering was slightly earlier than university, where I think it's probably the same with you, where the discussions around, you know, NASA. I mean, at the time I wanted to go to NASA. I think I was in grade 10,
Okay.
and that was pretty cool, of course. And that's how I actually got into aerospace, and I was fortunate enough to have the marks, which was amazing. But it was the doors, psychological doors, that needed to be opened by different people. Where someone, I remember very clearly, I think my French teacher, um, she basically she was teaching French, but we went to, I think, her house or something, and she had something about space,
Oh wow.
and that caught my eye, because she was showing me all the different pictures and so forth, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's not just NASA, it's also the French do it, and da 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 da, and I was like, okay, wow. So when you reflect back, like you're doing now, it's just all of a sudden you see these strings of people that fundamentally played a pivotal part in you achieving where you're at today, and really having the drive, right? Because I think sometimes we think drive is just something that you inherit, but it actually is nurtured, right? You got to
Yeah,
nurture it in
for sure.
and have people to nurture it alongside with you. Now, if I were to ask in terms of some of the challenges that you've had and some of the life-changing moments you've had over the journey, as kind of figuring out what this means for yourself, studying science, and I mean beyond, of course, just the normal kind of hardship of passing classes and so forth, but just kind of on a human level, what are some of the challenges that you've been facing over these periods as you've been going through different levels?
Um, I think one of the rearing challenges that I really had to come face to face with more and more as I grow into my science journey is the learning to be okay with not, how do I say this? Not I want to say failing, but that's not it. But like not always succeeding straight away. And like the process, okay, yeah, maybe that's the word, like the process of being great, or the process of getting somewhere. I think, because for me, I mean, high I've been studying my whole entire life. So prior to post grad, I didn't I worked hard, got the result, and 1 + 1 = 2. But I think with post grad, it really started to teach me about the process, and to be patient with the process, and to be patient with myself, and to be patient with learning and failing and not knowing. And so that's been something that's been such a glaring thing for me. And That's something that I really have to learn. I'm still learning it, really, if I'm being honest, because it's really really hard, thinking that you can't get it straight away. Like, what do you mean? Like, you can read all the papers or whatever, but it's just sometimes some things just don't work,
Yeah.
like, period. And it's it's beyond your control. So low key being a control freak, and wanting to know what's going to happen, and if I do this, it should be this outcome. So it's learning to be okay with that process. And yeah, it's hard. That's just, if I can, that's literally one of the hardest things that I've had to learn. And I think it's been in my academic life, really, where it's really come at me glaringly. But I've also realized that in just me as Anne, I'm also a process. I'm a person who is in a process of becoming, coming from, in various roles. So just learning to be okay with the process. And even if the process sometimes is gonna suck, you're gonna suck. Okay, you're not gonna know. Okay, they're gonna people who
Yeah.
who know better than you. Okay, like really, just you can put all this effort and it won't work. Okay, like okay,
Yeah.
like that is
Yeah.
like so that's just been like a glaring, that's just been one thing to just learn to honor the process and to honor the scars, to honor the failures, to understand that okay, fine, how do I move on, how do I get up again? Yeah, that's just been, yeah, that's been key. Like I haven't figured out, I don't know if you have, but I haven't figured
Yeah.
it
I don't know. I think I mean if I were to kind of add my 5 cents to that is I think process is it's the fun part in a way
okay.
because the outcome is so, at least for me, so temporary, right? I mean, you
Mm,
graduating, for example, let me give you a very good example, right?
yeah,
Me graduating is such a hype, and I'm sure you know what I'm saying.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
you buying the gown or you're renting it and the whole thing, and then the kind of getting dressed up, your parents being happy, da 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 da, and your friends, and maybe a mini celebration afterwards. But it's gone the next day. It's gone.
done.
It's that, and in a way, you actually, at least for me, actually feel a bit like, what the heck is this, man? Like, why?
Mm,
Why did I make such a big fuss about this
mm,
event
mm,
versus me just kind of soaking in the process
mm,
and
mm.
kind of maximizing me being better and me being wiser through the process.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I've started kind of being okay with failure during the process because you realize
Mm,
there's some I need to fail, right? I need to
yeah.
figure this thing out because the process is what lasts. You know, it's
Yeah,
it's
that's
what I
true.
mean. It's when I graduated. I mean, I didn't get a chance, and I didn't even miss it. Here's the funny thing. I didn't miss not being present at my PhD graduation, my doctorate.
Okay. It was
I
just
didn't
like,
miss it. But it's because I think because of the mindset of the process. The
yeah.
process was very much more important. Where
Mm,
the process is the one that has the lessons. The process is the one that has all the reflections. And if you allowed it to, right? If you
mm,
if you just kind of closed your eyes and I just want to finish, and you don't really take the time to think about it, then of course the process is not as important to you as what it should be.
mm.
But yeah, so I do think the process is definitely something that gives a lot more color to who you are as a human being by the time the event kind of where everybody celebrates you and everybody kind of gives it your flowers, and rightfully so, right?
Yeah.
But man, it's what has transpired all those years that I think is worth celebrating in my view. And I think that's kind of leads me a little bit to the next question because
Oh.
how has it been for you as a woman, as a black woman in South Africa,
Mhm.
within the context of what we know South Africa has in terms of challenges from women rights and so forth, and women abuse, women and children abuse. How has it been navigating that, and within the context of science being predominantly male? How has that been for you? It's kind of the experience, and of course you're not done, so I'm assuming it's still carrying on. But
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you can say that within that context?
Yeah, I think being a woman in science in South Africa was quite interesting. Upon reflection, I realized I never had uh, a female scientist, what do you call it, a female teacher or lecturer, black, until
Yeah.
I think sometime in post grad or was it fourth year maybe. But she literally only taught us for like one little course in a course, like one topic. And I remember seeing this woman, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, look at her! She's so cool." Because I never saw that, and I loved it because she looked beautiful, she dressed well, and because also we're in agriculture, so even in our campus, they have a stereotype about how we don't care and we don't look after ourselves. So just seeing her beat that stereotype was so cool for me, and I was like, I want to be like her. So it was very hard to find people who looked like me because it's very dominated. So for me, what I think has helped is that back to community, I seeked out environments that could foster that. So I joined Black Women in Science, which was started by the late Ndoni Nkunu, who was, in fact, one of my tutors when I was an undergrad. So when I joined, I was doing my master's, and she was trying to create a community as well for Black women scientists in South Africa. And it was so beautiful to see young Black women, in various different disciplines. And it was a great opportunity for empowerment and mentorship, and even that whole idea as well. Ndoni was so special. She forged a light, even for me personally, even when I was navigating this. I would go to her and be like, "Oh my gosh, Ndoni, this has happened. Like, how should I do it?" And she could be that person where, as much as she was, because it was beautiful, she was still studying, but she was trying to create this organization, and that was somebody who I could lean on to because I was trying to do something similar. So I had to actively seek out women representation. But I will say, for me, in terms of the male, the male figures in my academic life, absolutely brilliant. I always brag about them. I have the most fantastic supervisors. I even call them my academic dads because of who they are. They genuinely support, and even when there were moments where it got really hard, they allowed me the space to go through my stuff and gave me the grace to come back. And they really support my growth because they also recognize, like, and you being a Black woman in the space is rare. So I've got wonderful supervisors, Professor Alfredo Dindo and Professor Paramo Mafungoya, really amazing supervisors who really allow me to fly, sometimes afraid. But so in terms of that academic space, I'm so grateful for that, because I know some other people, they don't have that. But also at the same time, even recently, I had to seek out a female professor because I realized I was growing up, and there were moments now where it's not just about life, about academics. I'm now having a personal life. I want to know how to balance, in the future aspirations of having a family and, having a husband and all of that stuff. And as much as I have my academic dads and they're great, they can't give me that perspective because they're male, So for me, intentionally, I realized again, I need to seek out somebody who I can see, who, from my perspective, I feel like she's got it together. And I was grateful because she was a former lecturer, and I remember I just sent her an email and I was like, "Prof, can I just chat to you?" So I think it really requires intentionality on our own part to really seek out these role models and for support. And if you don't have it, then you'd have to do the work to seek it out for yourself. And I'm grateful for that I've been fortunate enough to do that, to have that support, because goodness, you can't do this otherwise. You cannot. I mean, you can, but at the detriment of your mental health, your just capacity, because there was a moment where it got so hard. I didn't want to do this anymore. I honestly didn't. But there have been really amazing people who've given me that grace to sort of navigate in my academic space, and for that I'm really grateful. I've got, yeah, I will always say that. But just on the aspect of the female side, I think one has to seek that out intentionally, because it's still very few and far in between. But the great thing is that the women who are there, because they know to help you and to talk you through these moments. And yeah, so that's sort of one of the ways that I've navigated all of this.
Oh wow. Yeah, I think those are very wise kind of words for anyone who's kind of goes through similar challenges, because it is important. Community, right? It's you can't do this by yourself. It's really really exciting to hear that you've had really good pillars that have taken you under their wing, because it's yeah, I mean, I've got very similar kind of stories, because it is important. You know, you I mean, when you start, you are young, wide-eyed, naive, and in a way you are you are ripe for abuse, in terms of just not being treated fairly, or thinking that people, how can I say, would always have your best interest at heart, and only until they do you really feel like, oh wow, this is cool. This is cool that this person doesn't have to treat me this way, but he's choosing to treat me this way. And so it's really great to hear that. Now, in terms of, I mean, I know you spoke a little bit about kind of the mental health side of things, right? And I mean, I've gone through my fair share, maybe not to the point of kind of breaking down completely, but is it something that you can relate with, in terms of kind of mental health, and just kind of the journey of achieving higher education, like a master's and a doctorate? And is that something that you've seen or you've experienced?
Yeah, I've seen and experienced it. At the point, I think I didn't realize it, because I thought, nah, this can never happen to me until it
Mm.
does. Because yeah, this process, it's not easy, because it's such a refining process, and sometimes at the same time of you doing your experiments that are working or not working, life is happening simultaneously. So it's tough to strike the balance, and you're working on a timeline. With most of these programs, you have to finish within a certain amount of time. So it really does. And I think I'm grateful that, for example, our institution, they offer mental health support. And I always say, if you can take it, if you can go to therapy, goodness, please go. It's so important. And even with a friend, we were chatting about how you go to therapy and you think, I'm going to therapy for this problem, and then you start tackling things and you're like, wait a minute, this is not why I
Yeah,
came to
yeah.
you. So it's important. And I think it just also helps you, because it's just one of the ways that yeah, this life thing is not easy. So if you can get the help that you can, and if it's through going to therapy, or whatever these groups that some people have, or talking to someone, yeah, many of us, I think, many, and I think the more I talk about it, I realize, like, many people in academia have so many mental health issues. Some way they're able to speak about it, but some who are not, and some who don't even realize it, honestly. So yeah, yeah.
And do you feel like you are kind of on the mend? Where do you stand with kind of those specific mental health issues?
I think I'm on the mend. It was bad when it was bad, but now I think I'm more cognizant of the fact when my mental health is taking, you know. So I've, with the help of going to therapy, which was something that I was able to really talk about openly to my family, to my friends, to my supervisors. It's helped me sort of realize the triggers of any. And I think it's really nice to not make it such a stigmatized thing. It still is in some parts, but I think the great thing is now academia is also realizing that hey, we are a toxic bunch, and we need to have these conversations and to really talk about it because so many people struggle. And I remember one of the favorite thing that my therapist said was like, many black, especially black, well, she was saying to me, she's like, many black women struggle or go through a lot of mental health issues and they don't know that it's that. They just think that they're failing. And that's not it. So I think sometimes it's just recognizing that, you know what, I'm just struggling, but it doesn't mean that I'm failing. But it's something that can be worked on. And I'm sure the same can be said about black men too. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I mean, my wife always tells me, there are some things in your life that I think you should have gone to therapy for. And the main reason why she says that is because I think there are certain events where I've I've actually blocked them out. Um, where I actually don't remember what happened. I it's I think it's a coping mechanism, right? Whereby maybe a couple of years later you're able to kind of maturely uncover those things, and but at the time, or at least immediately afterwards, it's kind of like it's just don't go there. Or as usually guys, you kind of just yeah, whatever, yeah, yo, my man, nah, my man, Skawad fine, you'll be fine, man. And and you kind of brush it off like that.
Yeah.
Yet at the same time, you don't realize how many years it might take for you to even be able to uncover what really happened and how did you really feel, and what are some of the decisions that you could have made better if you had the right help.
Yeah.
And I do think, funny enough, as guys in academics, and that's maybe one thing I'm also quite happy about in a way, that I'd never studied beyond um, my BSc. I never did anything full time. It was always part time. Of course, there's a big caveat, right? It's a lot more stress because if you have a full time job, that really makes it really difficult. But the one thing I managed to at least sort of escape was kind of the the daily routine of being in an environment where the stresses are compounding based on you being there, and you being exposed to someone else being stressed or someone else going through really tough times, and you not really progressing or having an outlet. And funny enough, work was an outlet for me when I was
Oh,
studying,
wow.
instead of the other way around. Work was an outlet because I was able to deflate. I was able to kind of focus on something completely different. It wasn't my end all and be all, right? Because that's essentially what happens when you break down. You feel like, what's happening with my life? This is my thing, and
Yeah.
it's not happening, and this is my life. and and in a way, so to the point I'm making, I think that it is something that should constantly be spoken of, right? And without
Yeah.
stigma and without reservation, that indeed it is normal, like you're saying. You haven't failed. You haven't. You're not a failure. It's just stress,
Yeah.
and you got to deal with it just like any other stress.
Sure.
Just deal with it normally and not without feeling like there's an additional weight that you need to put on your shoulders because you should have and you could have and you didn't, and now life is ended. Um,
Yeah.
now, no, thanks for sharing. I think this is quite an amazing kind of space, right, in terms of mental health and in science and in general in terms of academics, which I think oftentimes as an African we don't really speak about. It's not something that is often spoken of, right? An African scientist within stress. It's like, my man, just, you know, relax, go dance, Go to the disco.
Not go dance. Yeah, yeah.
Go jive, man. Just go jive,
You'll
man.
feel better.
You
Play
feel
some
better.
play some piano there.
I'm a piano, man. Come on.
Yeah.
You are seeing this thing too seriously, as they will say, which is quite
Yeah.
condescending. Now, if I were to kind of, try and at least move to the world of where you're at, and it's an amazing world because you've got a special window, in my view, of what different African people are doing based on all the people you've interviewed from different spheres, some of them in diaspora, some of them directly, in Africa. What is your view of science or STEM in general within the African continent? What are some of the key things that pop out when you think about STEM and Africa and the future of it?
Okay, so initially, I think the thing that I'm seeing is that I'm so grateful that science is not only about being a doctor or an engineer. No offense.
No, none taken.
No offense, because growing up, that's all that it was. So it's so cool to see now that, we've become a little bit more diverse. Even in medicine, people are doing stuff like immunology. That's really big. Okay, well, in terms of what I'm seeing, like that's really great. It's not just being a doctor, like people are specializing or they're becoming various different things. I think that's been really cool. And just the move of Africans who are really great at maths, and not only being a maths teacher, but like the application of maths in various different disciplines has been so beautiful to see. Whether it's in health, whether it's in tech, whether it's in even agriculture, there's there's that maths. And I mean, now it's so exciting seeing Africans at the forefront of technology and AI. I think, oh gosh, Africans are excited and we are there and just watching the applications of this type of work, not only in science, but even in the real world. When you think of, for example, Kenya being the silicone savannah, as they call it, and the amount of really great work that's being done there. There's a lot of work that's being done with there's a lot of AI technology in terms that's coming out, but now there is AI in terms of they're making it more accessible. So different language translations being led by Africans. So it's so cool, like watching that, Africans are excited and science is more diverse. It's not just this boring thing. Okay, well, from what I've been experiencing, and I think it really makes me very excited about it. Like, it's like, look at that, like that's an African who's doing that. And I mean, we saw that with COVID, with South Africa being at the forefront of some really amazing work in terms of the vaccine development. So I think I think that's why it gets me, like, I'm in the right space. Like, I'm in the right space because the world is eager to see what Africa is doing. And there's a lot more access for Africans to showcase what they're doing. Because in the past, when we looked at our stats in terms of how we worked, it was, our reach, we were so limited because it was only done through like journals and that had paywalls and whatever. But now we can do a podcast like you and I, or somebody can create their own Wikipedia page or create the things that makes it very easy for people to see what we're doing. And it also makes it very easy for the public to see what we're doing, and also makes it very easy for things to be implemented and for people to be like, oh snap, this is science, so man, I'm excited. Africa is doing some really amazing things, and to be in that part where I get to be that, amplifier of that. I'm excited. This is only the beginning, and the fact that there even are more and more people who are getting into the space of amplifying the work that's being done in STEM in various different capacities, or even just narrowing it down. Like, for example, like I said, where there's somebody I know of a podcast with just amplifies Africans who are in immunology, or Africans who do agriculture related stuff, or Africans in medicine or informatics. So it's like really cool because people are like, listen, this is us,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
can find us here, 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 here. So yeah, good times, man.
Yeah, but it's really exciting to hear your passion, because that's essentially also what I'm seeing. And um and I do think, of course, I mean, the podcast is one thing, my side hustle is another. um and I do think it's, what's exciting for me, is that Africans are no longer afraid. When you remove the fear and you remove the victim mentality, what comes out is just this bold yet gracious fighter that wants to show and hungry to show, what they can do. Because for so many, like you're saying, for so many years, the narrative has been completely different.
Yeah.
And there is so much that is in the continent that can be at the forefront of both science and technology. And yeah, no, but thanks for kind of giving that picture, because it is important. It is important for people to hear
Sure.
that indeed Africa, I mean, a lot of people who are watching the podcast are from Germany and so forth, where I am, and it's important for them to hear that Africans are doing stuff. They're doing, and they're doing it internally, right? It's not even to say, oh, okay, I don't know, I need someone, Papa Smurf from Switzerland to help me. No, and there's nothing wrong with that, but the point I'm making is that it is recognized that I can do this.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to do this. Now, this is quite interesting, because in terms of your podcast, there are, of course, some technical things that I wanna, as we close off, I want you to kind of give a bit of light on. What are some of the, in your view, what are some of the mistakes that you've kind of seen, or let's put it the other way, what are some of the steps that, if someone who's watching today says, "Oh my word, it's Anne. Oh wow, that's, what, the superstar, right? Of podcasting in STEM." I
Yeah.
will. I have an idea, but I just don't know where to start. I don't know kind of the steps that I should follow. How would you answer kind of some of these doubts or some of these questions that a person like that might be having about, kind of, I have something to say, but I just don't know where to start, and I have sort of an idea.
That's a good question, and I think that's where a lot of people end up in. Like, I want to start a podcast, but I just don't know how. Oh, I love this, and I want to start a podcast about it. But I think, okay, great, you want to start a podcast, sure, but for what? I think that's like the main, like, okay, you love you love wrestling, right? And you want to start a podcast about it because you love it. But for what? What will the person who's going to listen get from listening to your podcast? Like, why? The why should be well defined. And I think a lot of people feel like, no, but I have a lot of information and I just want to send it to the world. But for what? Why should I? There's millions, literally millions of podcasts. Like, any person now with earphones can start a podcast. So I think for me, not to discourage, I just say, for what? Like, you really need to know what your for what is. And your for what could just be sharing information about really cool wrestlers and where they are, right? Where they were or where they are right now. Cool. That's your for what. You want to show people who loved wrestling growing up, like nostalgia. Okay. Then you figured out your for what. I think that's very important. Not just to say you want to start a podcast because you have a lot of things on your mind. Okay, sharp. Then what? So I think that's one of the main things. And then once you figured that out, is sort of, it's some of your objectives. Who is going to listen to this podcast? Because, like I said, there's 5 million podcasts. If there's a person who wants to listen to WWE wrestling, who is that individual? Paint that character. That's very important. how long? What type of podcast? Is it you just talking about podcasting and just you by yourself? Is that the type of podcast that you want to do? Or do you want to have interviews where you have other people on the podcast? And even with those interviews, is it other fans of WWE wrestling, or is it former WWE wrestlers? Like those are some of the steps. I mean, I can really go into it, but like I think the for what, who's gonna listen, what type of podcast is it, how long? Is it an hour podcast? Is it a 15-minute podcast? Is it, so those are some of the things. And then also, okay, what do I have? What do I have for me to start? What can I do? Because another thing I think sometimes with people with podcasting is you want to have all this wonderful equipment and all of this. And I feel like that just, I don't want to say it cuts the process, because obviously you want to have good quality audio. But sometimes you can get so boggled down. I've seen it, literally. I've seen it where somebody has been wanting to start a podcast for 2 years, but they can't start this podcast because they, like their tools like that. Like, so it's stuff like that. Like, what do you have? Where can you start? Because you're going to suck. You are going to, like my first couple of episodes, I sucked. I mean, it's tough. I don't even like to listen to them, but like maybe the first 20 episodes, they're not going to be great. But the only way that you can do it is to continue, and then also not to be so boggled down on how many people are listening to your podcast. I think that's also like a killer, because you see, I don't know, Joe Rogan or Trevor Noah, and they were people before the podcast. The podcast didn't really make them, so they have audiences that are coming to them because of Trevor Noah, the comedian. But you as Anne, who do you have? So you have to understand that you have to create a community, your own community. And sometimes that community might just be 80 people, but at least it's 80 people who come on every single week where consistently. So you'd rather have 80 people than one person today than 200 tomorrow, just because you had, I don't know, Trevor Noah on the show, then you have 2 million people. Then the next episode when you have Anne, they're not going to listen, and then it's just 3 people. I mean, so like really understand that you have to have you're going to have to mark out a niche and really honor the people who come on and listen to your show every week. Like those people who really come on every single week and are excited about you, that's exciting. The millions of people, sure, they will come, and maybe with the fancy marketing tools, when you have the capacity, you can get into all of that. But I think one thing that I had to learn is honor the people. Like, let's say, for example, when I release a podcast, we usually release it midnight. So it'll be midnight in Africa, and then like in America and stuff, it's still during early evening, late evening, or in Australia where some of our people are, it's early morning. And I know literally within the first hour or so, there'll be a certain amount of people who I know are the consistent sort of number, because they're the people who've listened to it because they're like abroad. And I love those like 12 people who I know always within that first hour or two. Love them. I don't know who they are, but I love them because I know they are like the first ones. And then sure, it'll grow when other people in the world have woken up or whatever. But those like 12 to 20, the number really varies between there. My favorite, because I know they're the ones who always, like, without fail, will come to they'll listen. So just really honor your audiences as well. Honor the process. I was even telling somebody from my team that, we have to honor the fact that sometimes we don't have a huge audience so that we can learn to be great. I'm grateful for that, because I've had a lot of time to hone my skills, and now when I show up, I know what value I bring, because if you listen to my other podcasts, you're going to see the difference. So you're going to see the difference in terms of how I ask questions, how I listen, so you have to maybe just enjoy not being in the limelight until you're ready. And that's probably just God's grace as well. Just allowing you to learn and to be good. So I think that's another thing. And also another thing, just start where you are, man. Start with what you have, and then you'll figure out the rest of the stuff. You'll figure out the fancy equipment, you figure out the fancy earphones, you figure out the fancy, I don't know, paying for all of it. Like, don't let that be that stumbling block. If you have the ideas, if you can answer those questions that I spoke about, then start. Literally.
Wow. Come on, man. This is the it. This is the ish, as they say. This is the ish. You know. No, but thanks, and I think it's quite important. I mean, I'm I'm essentially writing mental notes as you're talking, because you can get carried away. And I am a new podcaster in this space, and I always have to be reminding myself that, listen, of course I've got other disciplines that helps me, right? So it's not it's just because I'm in podcasting doesn't mean that now other disciplines don't play a part in terms of just consistency and just doing the work. Is and the process, in my view, is actually a lot more tangible than kind of the blip in spike. And of course, it's a dopamine effect, right? You see, so many people. Yep,
Yeah.
I'm famous.
And then
You
next week you're
know?
down there and you're like,
And the next thing means how zero. Guys, come on. I put so much effort in this episode, guys. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And but you forget that either way, people are watching,
Mm,
people are listening, people are seeing whether you are consistent, whether you have a consistent voice, whether you have an itch that is sustainable
mm,
to consistently give the correct message and authentic, right? You want to be you, and I think every time I listen to you, and kind of you are you know, there's only one and I do think that's what people want, because that's attractive, you know. Being vulnerable and being authentic is a rare skill in today's society. You know, everybody kind
mm,
of wants to pretend to be or try to be someone else, because it's, self-reflection and accepting your faults is not an easy thing to do.
mm.
So no, but thanks for sharing. And I think I would like to close with just one specific question regarding, and I think you mentioned it earlier, and we never really touched on children and STEM, and the impact that you're hoping to have with respect to the reality today. So let me try and kind of break down what I'm trying to ask. Is, we know the African child still sees STEM as something that's not for them in many communities, right? Whether you go from Malawi, you go to Cameroon, you go to Ivory Coast, you go to Senegal, South Africa, Lesotho, STEM, in terms of science, engineering, mathematics, manufacturing, is still seen as something that's just not for me. Mainly because of the environment that a lot of children still grow up in, fundamentally, but also the perception. Yet there's not a lot of legacy that is kind of supporting the children, right? They don't always have an uncle, they don't always have a father, they don't always have a mother, they don't always have an auntie that really says, "Hey, it's just like teaching. It's just like, doing this other career." What are you hoping to achieve? What is the vision that you have through your podcast for children in STEM in Africa?
I think the answer is very simple. It's to have my platform be, the platform of visible role models for people, to young children, to see themselves in my guests, simply. Where, like you said, that, okay, fine, maybe at home, my mother might not see me in that way, but wait a minute, this person's from Cameroon. They sound like me, which is also really great because, we all have authentic accents. They sound like me. They grew up in an environment like me, but they are in, I don't know, the UK. And that's because of science, you know. They also have a similar story because I've also realized that our stories are so similar, which is so beautiful. Of course, there's some unique differences, but in the sense of many things, there's a lot of similarities being an African, and that's what I think makes us Africans, because we can just relate whether you're Nigerian, Malawian, South African. We have so many similarities, and just as we are as culturally. So with the platform, it's for a child to hear a story of a guest and be inspired and see themselves in that, and to be like, wow, that's they got there. And it's somebody who I can relate to. So it's a visible role model. You cannot aspire for something that you do not know exists. So that's exactly what I'm trying to do, to show that this is a reality that exists for you. And yeah, visible role models.
Yeah, that's thanks, and I think that is fitting last words, because visibility is so important to change the narrative. If things are hidden, people don't know they have options.
Yeah.
And having you in the front runner in terms of just being bold and really breaking that ceiling of saying, guys, look at all these people all around the world who have a similar mindset, look like you can be them, you can do the same, look at what they're doing and where they're working and the things that they're working on. And thank you so much for such an amazing conversation, man. This has been really, really great. I'm really excited about all the work that you're doing. I am I am an avid fan of
Oh
the
man.
Anne voice. And there you have it, an amazing interview with Anne Chisa, who is an amazing podcaster, who is a trailblazer in her field, who has shown that indeed it is possible to slowly but surely, as we say it here in Molo Molo, show that indeed the visibility of what the Africans are doing in STEM, in all areas of STEM, is indeed possible and relevant. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for allowing me to share these incredible stories and innovators and tech champions that are showing us that it is possible to create a new narrative for the African continent. This is Molo Molo Tech Stories. I'm Paula Nkantwe. Until next time, ciao.